Thank you. Good morning. Pain. Everyone has experienced it. Everyone knows it when they feel it. And yet, pain is complex and uniquely personal. Now, you're likely familiar with one of the sophisticated tools that's used to measure pain. A scale running from 0 to 10 with some helpful corresponding faces. Now, the beginning of the scale, pretty straightforward. 0, no pain. Everyone can agree on that. Each point after that, however, that's relative to our own idea of what a 10 is. Now, I'm sure everyone here remembers their own 10. I won't make you relive that right now. Instead, I'll do it for you. Let me tell you about my 10. Now, I was in college. I had just finished watching TV for the evening, and I just stood up from the couch. I felt a pop in my knee, and I fell straight to the ground. That pain was intense, but that wasn't quite the 10 yet. That pain faded, so much so that I decided, as a broke college student, that I was going to try and sleep it off, hope for the best. I'm sure to the surprise of nobody out here, it didn't work. I woke up in the morning and my knee still hurt. So my next best option, I decided, let's go to a doctor. There, I had a physical exam, and they ordered some imaging. And eventually, I found myself in front of an orthopedic surgeon. He had my results in hand, and he looked at me, and I'll never forget this. He said, quote, "This is incredible, and that's not something you want to hear from an orthopedic surgeon." End quote. He was right. Didn't want to hear it. He went on to tell me that what was so incredible was that when I stood up from that couch, a piece of my femur had actually broken off. And to add to that, it was so large that the best course of treatment was to actually get a piece of femur from a donor and implant that in my knee. Pretty standard stuff, Fast forward about a month, they located the donor, and I had the surgery on an outpatient basis. They sent me home, same day, with some opioids, some ice, and my brand new shiny femur. Well, that night, at about 2 a.m., I woke up with the most intense pain I have ever felt. That was my 10. The opioids weren't touching it. There was no thought of even trying to sleep this one off. I went straight to the ER. At the ER, after a short wait of a couple hours in a hallway, they did eventually give me some medicine that helped the pain fade. Now, since then, I've been able to rehab my injury, and I live relatively pain-free to this day. Unfortunately, that's not the same story for everyone. For some, the pain never goes away. In this presentation, we're going to explore pain and its evolving role in workers' compensation. You will see how reduced opioid prescribing fits into changes in pain management approaches. You will see the cost implications of these changes, and you will see how advancements may impact both treatments and cost moving forward. Now, to explore pain in workers' comp, we worked with medical experts to identify pain treatments in our medical data call. And pain treatments are identified in 2 ways. First, we look at individual treatments specific to treating pain. This includes drugs like your opioids or NSAIDs, minor surgeries, which are mostly pain injections here, as well as some major surgeries like spinal fusions. We add to this any medical treatment where the diagnosis is identified as a pain medical condition. So this adds treatments such as physical medicine, which is mostly physical therapy, evaluation and management visits, E&M for short, as well as imaging. Now, pain medical conditions here are those where the main complaint or symptom is pain. So you can think things like low back pain or neck pain, even chronic pain. Now, with this definition, let's take a look at the cost of treating pain in workers' comp. the overall medical cost per active claim has been steadily increasing by about 2% per year since 2012. Now, back in 2012, pain treatments, they cost about $1,500 per claim, represented by that blue bar there. That was about 40% of the total medical cost. However, since then, pain treatment cost has been remarkably flat, staying right around $1,500 per claim. So, as of 2023, pain treatments are now a smaller share of that overall cost, coming in at around 30%. That flat cost of pain treatment is due to two major factors. First, we see 14% fewer claims reporting any pain management treatments in 2023 as compared to 2012. So simply fewer claims reporting any pain management treatments. And second, for those claims still reporting pain management treatment, the cost has grown slowly, averaging just over 1% per year. The slow growth results from declining drug costs putting downward pressure on overall pain cost. And this was most impactful up through service year 2019, where pain cost per pain claim was essentially flat. However, as drug costs have declined, so too has the level of downward pressure they can exert. And what we saw since 2020 is that increases in costs from all other treatments are now outpacing declining drug costs. Here, the cost per claim has been increasing. Now, unraveling the story under these cost changes is going to provide us insights into what has happened so far, as well as what future changes may be on the horizon. Let's start with drugs, and no surprise here, the story is a significant decline in opioids. And that brings us to the central question. If not opioids, then what? Now, to answer this, we first need to take a deeper look into what pain is. In most cases, pain starts with a physical injury. You can think something standard like standing up from a couch and breaking your femur, or a more accurate example of a work injury, a slip and fall, you hurt your hand trying to catch yourself. Now here, the injury is detected by nerves that are close to the injury site. The body sends an electrical signal through a series of nerves to the spinal cord. The spinal cord then passes that signal along to the brain, where the brain processes the signal, resulting in the pain sensation. Now, there are also cases where the pain signal originates from the nerves that transmit the signal. This is commonly known as neuropathic pain. Individual genetics, as well as other health factors, also significantly impact the pain experience. For example, mental health factors such as anxiety or depression, and physical conditions such as obesity all play a role. And understanding this process and these factors is important because different treatments impact pain at different parts of the process. And when discussing replacements for opioids, I like to think of two different concepts. First, we have our pain relief treatments. That includes opioids. Pain relief treatments essentially reduce the pain signal. This mostly consists of alternative drugs, as well as minor surgeries, which again, that's mostly your pain injections. Second, we have what I like to refer to as pain resolution treatments. Now, pain resolution is aimed at resolving the underlying injury. And improvements in pain resolution can reduce the need for ongoing pain relief. Pain resolution includes both treatments which identify and diagnose the injury, your E&M visits as well as your diagnostic imaging, and also treatments which aim to resolve or minimize the physical cause of injury. That includes your surgeries like spinal fusions and your physical medicine, which again, that's mostly physical therapy. So let's start looking for our opioid replacements with alternative pain relief, and specifically start with drugs. Here we essentially just want to know how often an alternative drug is used instead of an opioid. Now, measuring the use of drugs gets pretty complex pretty fast. It includes like the share of injured workers prescribed a drug, the number of prescriptions they get, the number of pills per prescription, the strength of those pills, the list goes on. I'm sure you get the picture. Luckily for us, we can just leverage the work that Raji presented on yesterday in his utilization measure. Now, drug utilization provides a single measure that accounts for all of these nuances. and drug utilization has come down significantly, about 5% per year. Now, unsurprisingly, opioids have driven the bulk of this decrease. However, what may be surprising is that other drug classes have seen decreased usage as well, such as muscle relaxants, NSAIDs, anticonvulsants, anti-anxiety, and antidepressant medication. Now, you may have thought that as opioids decline, other types of drugs would increase in usage. Logical, right? Here, we actually see the opposite, and the decrease in some of these drugs may be directly caused by declining opioid usage. Here's why. Opioid use, especially long-term chronic use, creates side effects, such as anxiety, insomnia, gastrointestinal distress. These side effects are often treated with additional drugs. Without the opioids creating the side effects, the other drugs are no longer needed. And this brings us to a major finding. A significant share of opioid use has simply not been replaced by any alternative pharmaceutical. In fact, the share of pain management claims receiving any prescription drug has decreased by 15% since 2012. This reduction in reliance on opioids and drugs in general aligns with several changes that came in response to the opioid epidemic. First, we'll start with the regulatory response. Now, the drug management framework is complex, starting with changes outside of our system, such as the CDC's 2016 guidelines on opioid prescribing, as well as prescription drug monitoring programs, which both impacted our system. Now, within workers' comp, there are many pieces to the puzzle. Most states had existing drug fee schedules, as well as various other prescribing rules, such as generic substitution requirements, reimbursement rules for repackaged or compounded drugs, as well as limits on physician dispensing. In response to the opioid epidemic, several states either adopted or updated treatment guidelines, utilization review, as well as drug formularies. These tools focus on ensuring that injured workers receive appropriate evidence-based care. Now, beyond the regulatory response, there were also changes in pain management best practices. There was more focus placed on the individual and at using multiple types of treatment aimed at early pain resolution over ongoing pain relief. Now, there's also been a shift in public perception. The opioid epidemic caused people in general to be more cautious, to seek treatments with lower perceived potential risk. I know in the last 5 years, I've had an opioid prescription I simply didn't fill, choosing to deal with the mild or moderate pain I had rather than the risk of opioids. So some injured workers may simply prefer to tolerate slightly more pain today than they would have a decade ago. Now, within these changes, within the framework, we did see one drug that saw increased utilization: topicals. Topicals includes things like creams, gels, and patches. They offer localized pain relief with reduced systemic effects and reduced potential for addiction. Topical utilization increased about 50% since 2012. And as of 2023, topicals represent the largest share of drug utilization in pain management claims. However, as you can see, topical utilization is nowhere near where opioids were at their peak. And so wrapping up our look into drug utilization, opioids have simply not been replaced by any other drug. In fact, many other drugs saw reduced utilization as well. However, when we're looking at cost, topicals are making a bit more of a splash. The cost per claim of topicals has actually tripled since 2012. And a major driver of this increase has been increased prescribing of high-priced private label topicals. Some private label pain patches can cost about $1,500 for a 30-day supply. These topicals often contain unique combinations of existing pain relief treatments, such as lidocaine and menthol. These same ingredients are available over the counter for a fraction of the cost. For example, a generic lidocaine cream, as well as Icy Hot or Bengay, can all be purchased for about $20. Now, the cost impact of topicals varies considerably by state, and the existing drug management framework in a state plays a significant role. Private label topicals are unique combinations of over-the-counter ingredients. That means there's usually not generic equivalents available. They're also not repackaged, and they don't fall under most compounding rules since the ingredients are combined by the manufacturer. Fee schedules are typically based on average wholesale price. The manufacturer set the average wholesale price, so in this case, high average wholesale price means high fee schedule maximums. Now, drug formularies, treatment guidelines, utilization review, and limits on physician dispensing do provide some management of topicals in the states that have them. Now, in response to these high-priced topicals, several states, including Georgia, South Carolina, Colorado, and Mississippi, have implemented price caps specific to topicals. These are flat fees. They are not tied to the average wholesale price. This is a relatively new approach. These caps apply broadly to any topical that falls within the scope defined by each state, effectively capping prices. So, opioids have not been replaced in terms of overall utilization. When it comes to cost, however, topicals are making their case, but it does vary significantly by state. Now, let's move our focus to non-drug alternative pain relief. Here, we start with spinal cord stimulators. These devices are implanted and send electrical impulses which mask the pain signal. This provides pain relief, potentially reducing reliance on drugs. Now, these devices, as well as the surgery to implant them, are costly, averaging around $40,000 per surgery. They also come with significant risks of complications. Now, while their high cost does make them stand out when used in workers' compensation, we don't see them used frequently, and we haven't seen any significant increase across time. Now, pain injections, on the other hand, these have lower risks of complications, and they're much more commonly used. They provide targeted relief by delivering medicine directly to the site of pain. These treatments can offer significant pain relief, reducing the need for ongoing drugs. Now, in workers' comp, the share of pain management claims receiving a pain injection has increased from about 28% back in 2012 up to 31% in 2023. While certainly an increase, not enough to move the needle in terms of pain relief replacements. Pun intended, thanks for the laugh there. So, for pain relief, no other drug or non-drug alternative has replaced opioids. Let's move our focus now to the pain resolution side. And here at a high level, we're seeing similar movements to what Raji presented yesterday on overall utilization. There's been an increase in the utilization of physical therapy, and there's been a reduction in surgery rates. More selectivity here in surgical procedures can lead to higher success rates and fewer complications. While that surgery utilization is declining, the prices certainly are not. So on the surface, the pain management cost per pain management claim has been slowly increasing. But the shift in treatment approaches away from the ongoing pain relief and to early pain resolution has other cost implications. Now, we've been looking at costs so far on a service year basis. A service year includes all payments on all claims regardless of when the accident occurred. In fact, our medical data call includes payments up to 30 years beyond the accident date. This introduces another interesting aspect, which is the timing of treatments. Pain resolution treatments, these are typically provided early in the life of a pain claim, generally within the first 2 years. Now, drugs, they're used in the first 2 years as well, but the majority of drugs are utilized for ongoing long-term pain relief beyond 2 years. Looking at cost here, in 2012, the total cost for treatments beyond the first 2 years came in at around $1,150 back in 2012, excuse me. Drugs accounted for just about 40% of that. Fast forward to 2023. The cost for everything other than drugs remained pretty flat. Drugs, on the other hand, came down significantly. Drugs are almost entirely responsible for the decline in cost we see beyond the first 2 years. When we look at the cost within the first 2 years, however, that has been increasing. This results in a shift, pushing a larger share of payments into earlier time periods. And that has implications for overall loss development patterns. Now, we've basically already covered the changes beyond 2 years, that huge decrease in drugs. Moving forward, we are going to narrow our focus to the first 2 years of treatments. And for this exploration, we're going to further split that first 2 years into 2 phases. First, we have the acute phase, which consists of all treatments provided from the accident date up to 90 days after. Then, we have the chronic phase, which is all treatments from 90 days up to 2 years. Everything so far has also been aggregated across all types of injuries. Impacts to individual injuries can vary significantly. The early treatments, the likelihood of surgery, the probability of needing ongoing chronic care, all differ by the specific injury. To illustrate these differences, let's look at the lower back, which accounts for just about 1/3 of all pain management costs. Lower back injuries, like most claims, begin with that initial doctor visit, and the diagnosis at the time is typically generic and equates to low back pain. A doctor performs the physical evaluation and orders imaging if necessary. A physical cause is not identified in about 90% of the cases. Thus, the diagnosis remains general low back pain. For these injuries in the acute phase, following that initial visit and the imaging, treatments typically include pain drugs as well as physical therapy. In accident year 2016, in total, acute pain management on low back pain claims cost about $1,350. Most low back pain injuries resolve early on. Just over 20% require ongoing chronic care. Treatments in the chronic phase are more of the same that we saw in the acute. There is one exception, however. Pain injections start to play a larger role. In 2016, chronic pain treatments contribute an additional $675, bringing our total to just over $2,000 in 2016. Now, in 2022, the total cost is up to $2,350. That's an 18% increase. There's 2 main factors that drive this increase in cost. First, we saw an increase of 18% in the prices paid for our E&M visits. And second, we saw a 14% increase in utilization of physical medicine services. That's for accidents up through 2022. As Donna showed yesterday, the early look at accidents for 2024, that physical medicine utilization continues to rise. Now, this is important to look at these types of injuries because increases in costs for physical therapy and our general doctor visits, they have the largest impact on common low-severity injuries like low back pain. Now, we're going to turn our focus and we're going to take a look instead at the story of an injured worker who does receive a more specific diagnosis. In this case, after that initial visit and the imaging, the injured worker is diagnosed with a lower back disc disorder. Here, the early conservative treatments are pretty similar to what we just saw for low back pain. The major difference is that these injuries often do not resolve from those early treatments. And when conservative treatments don't resolve the pain, major surgery is often a next option. Now, we all know major surgeries are very costly, but they also introduce a new source of pain. That pain requires short-term pain treatments. So that's additional E&M visits, often with specialists, more drugs, more physical therapy. All of this adds up to higher cost. Coming in at a total of $4,400, that's over 3 times the cost that we saw for general low back pain in the acute phase. Now, for these types of injuries, surgery typically takes place after our initial conservative treatments. Most surgeries actually occur beyond the first 90 days. So the cost per claim in the chronic phase is even higher, coming in at about $12,800 on average. So in total, the cost to treat these injuries across the first 2 years was $17,200 back in 2016. As of 2022, it hasn't changed much, only coming up to 17,400. Here, the story is of two significant offsetting factors. Major surgery utilization, that's down 17% since 2016. This is driven by a decrease in the share of claims receiving a major surgery. Now, while the surgeries are becoming less common, the prices have been increasing, up about 30% across this time period. These two factors are largely offsetting, resulting in little change to the total cost of treatment. Here, understanding the pain process, where the treatments fit in, and how those treatments have changed helps us to understand changes that have already happened, as we just saw. But it also provides a framework for understanding how future changes may impact pain management. And not all future changes will come in the form of direct pain management treatments. Comorbidities play a significant role in pain. One of the most common comorbidities is obesity. Obesity can lead to slower recovery times and severely increase the risk of experiencing chronic pain. Obesity has been on the rise in the US for decades. Recently, GLP-1 drugs have burst onto the scene, such as Ozempic. Now, while these drugs don't directly manage pain, a reduction in obesity can reduce the need for ongoing pain relief. It can improve the pain experience. So how does this impact workers' comp? Well, let's do a quick poll. Put your hand up out there if you think that these drugs are becoming much more commonly prescribed in workers' compensation. For those of you out there with your hand up, you are certainly not alone. This is a question I've been asked several times over the last year. The reality is, as of now, we continue to see very little reporting of payments for these drugs in our data. However, even without significant uptake in the work comp system, these drugs could still have cost implications on our industry. One study suggests that the US obesity rate actually saw its first significant reduction in 2023 for the first time in over 40 years. If this were to be the start of a new trend, reduced obesity in the general population could mean healthier workers in general, and that could reduce the prevalence or severity of pain in workers' comp. Now, other future changes may come from how and when existing treatments are used. Cannabis has long been discussed as an alternative pain treatment. For cannabis, the reality here, clinical research remains limited. Side effects exist, and existing treatment guidelines do not recommend cannabis as a first-line option for pain treatment. In workers' comp, given the federal status, there's still very little reporting of any payments in our medical data. Research is currently conflicting as to the impact on work comp of states who have already legalized cannabis. Some studies suggest an increase in injury rates, while others a decrease. Until more robust evidence emerges, cannabis is best considered a complementary case-by-case treatment for specific types of pain, not a replacement for established first-line care. Another emerging alternative with potential applications is virtual reality. And virtual reality has applications potentially in both pain relief and pain resolution. For pain relief, VR can help manage acute pain during surgery by immersing patients in calming, interactive environments, interrupting the pain signal and distracting from that painful stimuli. Now, for pain resolution, at-home VR can boost adherence to rehab by turning repetitive exercises into engaging experiences, motivating participation. In workers' comp, VR is likely to serve as a supplemental treatment, potentially reducing acute drug utilization and assisting in the recovery process. As of now, VR is not likely to be a direct replacement for established pain management treatments. This next advancement, however, this one is hot off the presses. It's the first new class of pain management drug approved by the FDA in over 20 years. Journavex, the brand name for suzetrigine, was approved just a few months ago for acute pain treatment for moderate to severe pain. This new drug operates by interrupting the path of the pain signal before it gets to the brain. Critically, by operating outside of the brain, it creates no euphoria or high like opioids, which is reported to carry a much lower risk for addiction. Now, in work comp, opioids are still regularly used to treat severe acute pain. Here, Journavex may be an attractive alternative. Now, with a recommended price at $15.50 a pill, a 2-week prescription comes in at around $465. That's over 30 times the cost of typically prescribed generic Vicodin in workers' comp. While that upfront cost may be high, a non-addictive opioid replacement to manage that severe pain would come with significant benefits. Here, it's still very early on with Journavex, but this drug is certainly one worth keeping an eye on. Pain, it's a part of life. As our understanding of pain evolves, so too does our understanding of how to treat it. As the true cost of opioids emerged, the workers' compensation industry responded across the country. Pain management cost has been flat across the last decade. As of 2023, it accounts for about 30% of the annual medical spend. The move from pain relief to pain resolution has shifted treatments to earlier in the life of a claim. This has implications for loss development. The future of pain management will depend on how new advancements fit into the pain management framework in our system. As always, NCCI will continue to monitor these changes and inform the industry.